Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the order to order the Historic Preservation Commission meeting. It's a regular meeting, April 8th. We'll start with a roll call.
Commissioner Henry,
Present.
Chairman Palacios,
Here.
Commissioner Figueroa,
Here.
and Commissioner Choma.
Here.
We have 4 out of the 5 commissioners. We do have a quorum.
Thank you. If you all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So, first we have item 4 is the approval of the agenda. And the way the agenda stands, I've been asked to move forward item number 8, which are matters of staff, put them before the public hearing, because the public hearing, although I hope not, may run into a length of time. So, if there are any other comments on the agenda? Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 All right. Next, we have the approval of the minutes. They seem quite thorough to me. But if there are any comments from staff, I'd entertain them.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second that motion.
Those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so next we have the Citizens Forum, which are citizens willing to speak with comments at large that don't relate to this evening's meetings. We let you take the stand now if you have any concerns.
Or did you want to speak during the citizens forum or during the public hearing? Okay. So Pavel.
We'll come up and either, yes, the whole shebang.
I swear to tell the whole truth as I know it. My name is Pavel Lukash. Good evening, everybody. As if the town didn't have or didn't face enough challenges, I would like to draw the town's attention and the commissions, the P&Z and the Historic Preservation Commission, to a subject that we kind of looked at while I was still serving, and that's the issue of the invasive Chinese elm. And after hearing Jerry Brown's speech in California invoking restrictive measures on water, I just happened to become really intimately familiar with what Chinese elm does, because I just had Jose Contreras cut 4 huge Chinese elms close to my house and close to a shallow well that I bought with the house that went dry. And when he cut these Chinese elms down, he called me over and said, "Take a look at this." And the stump had water standing on top of it at the cut. And I just ran my hand across it, and it was totally wet. As a matter of fact, I sent those pictures to Mayor Baroni and Rick Bellis. And either on P&Z or Historical Preservation, I think we had arborists to come and to talk to us. So, and as I drive around, I mean, we're inundated with Chinese elms. I mean, it's like it's an impossible task, but maybe we can implement some ordinances that would help curtail new growth elimination of some old growth. Maybe you can come up with some funds to get rid of Chinese elms along our creeks, acequias. Look at Rio Fernando. That's all you see growing on both sides. So at our office on Gusdorf, my next task is I'm going to, on our side of Rio Fernando, we're going to get rid of all the Chinese elms. And I think we just need an advice from an arborist to tell us what we should replace them with. Anyway, but I think this could, 20 years from now, we might have New Mexico governor giving us the Jerry Brown speech on lack of water. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, Pavel. And that was one of the points that when the arborist spoke, he was going to come up with a replacement
I think
tree.
we need to pick it back up.
What's that?
I think that we need to just pick it back up.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Anybody else or any comments on Pavel's notice? All right. When we move on to matters of staff, we have an informal presentation. The first one is McDonald's. I assume that's the restaurant. Exterior remodel presentation.
Yes, we're here.
Would you like to present, please?
Here?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And if I may, were there any notes that any recommendations you were making?
No, because it's just an informational presentation on this one.
Okay.
Hi.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mike, let me have do I need to be sworn in?
Yes, you do, sir.
Even,
No?
I don't think for a
No, you don't, sir.
presentation.
I guess because it's informal. You don't. But it'd be nice if you stated your name.
Oh, well, yes, my name is Angel Pala. I've been the owner of McDonald's here in Taos since 1989. And Mike Compton over there has been the contractor that has done all the work on McDonald's since 1989.
Okay.
Basically, the job that we're proposing to do is to bring the building of McDonald's more closely to Taos architecture. We want to replace the tile roof as it is presented in one of the pictures that you have by a straight, we remove that tile roof and make it a straight wall. And and the other part of the job would be to replace the brick cladding that is on the bottom part of the wall with stone cladding, and that would be basically what we're looking to do in the building, and that is mostly in the rear part of the building. The front part was done back in 1995. As a matter of fact, when the Historical Commission first came, this was one of the first jobs that they approved, the architecture for the McDonald's building as it stands today.
So, are you proposing a porch or portal with a parapet, or are you?
No, there is
it's hard to read the
there is a
elevation.
portal that it won't go. The portal is already there. If you take a look at the picture, the portal will remain as it is today. The only thing will be is that the tile roof, the tile awning, what do we call that, Mike?
It's a mansard.
The tile mansard that is present now will be removed, and it will make just straight, typical Taos architecture.
So then, what remains is kind of a ramada or that structure there with the corbels and posts.
Yes.
That remains, and then that will protect the people as they enter there. Is that what that?
No, that's just an outdoor seating thing. It's just like a sofa, just shade.
Yeah, or ramada. Or,
Yeah, it's present there today. It won't be removed. It'll stay as it is today.
Okay. Why don't you put tin on it? Let them look like tiles. Okay.
What's that?
I was being glib. I'm not trying to design your building. I had just said, why don't you put tin on it, corrugated tin, and then it would maybe fit. But I probably shouldn't be saying things like that. I think it will be an addition, nice deduction that will improve the look of your building to remove that. I think you're right.
And we plan to do this sometime June, July of this year. We'll have the engineering drawings to submit it to the planning department probably within the next month.
And then the stone that you're using, is that real stone or is that painted, cultured?
I think they're spec cultured stone in it, and there's slump block there right now, split face, painted to make a wainscot or a brick wainscot around there. We're going to take that off. Whatever they're.
And you're going to use that?
And basically, if you've been in the inside of the restaurant, you see that there's stone on the wall around the counter, and it'll be to mimic that wall on the outside. And I think it'd be a more natural look than the brick that is present there. That was originally with the original building that was built in 1980, and we plan to replace that if it's approved.
George Chavez's building. Mr. Chavez's building.
George Chavez
Yeah.
built it, yes, sir.
Yeah.
I bought the restaurant from George.
Right.
Yes, sir.
And you're his neighbor.
I am his neighbor,
Yes.
that's correct.
Okay. Nice place you have.
House, right?
What's that?
Didn't you design George's house?
I may have, yes.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with today.
Now, George is in Albuquerque, I think.
Yes, he sold it.
Yes, yes.
Well, thank you. Is there any other comments?
No, this is an informal presentation. I very much appreciate your being here this early. And from what I'm seeing here, this is looking like it's going in an excellent direction, and I want to compliment you on that. And I look forward to witnessing the progression.
We
as
will,
go along.
and I think that Mike submitted some pictures where it shows exactly how we're going to do the job. They're the pictures when we originally did the front part of the building where we cut that mansard, and that's precisely what we're going to do. And it will be a straight wall as it's shown in the rendering.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions?
Okay.
This is a McDonald's you're a franchise owner, correct?
I am the franchise owner, yes.
Do your improvements require corporate approval?
The improvements are coordinated through the requirements of the town. Normally, the architecture of McDonald's building is pretty much defined by corporate. If you go around the state, you will see that they have a new design for their buildings. Obviously, that is not permitted here. We have never tried to do that. And what we did is, being that we're also required to modernize our buildings continually and keep them up to date, we felt that this addition of or replacement of the tile mansard would be appropriate to the historical district, and that's what we offered the corporation, and these were the drawings as a result of those conversations.
Okay, so then, I guess I'm a little not clear on what, the part that's the mansard overhang there,
And which
is that going to be enclosed? That's going to be gone?
It's going to be gone.
Okay.
I've got some demolition. When we built the playland back in 1995, we did the same thing to the front of the building.
Okay,
Just a house wrapped around.
That's what I thought I understood, and then sometimes on these elevations, they're still kind of flat. It's hard to see. And so,
And there's-
I was just curious, is
There's
it-
a little bit more detail on the building. It's not, there's some offsets and stuff.
is it a hazard to have the overhang, or is it just all visual?
It's a re-imaging thing with McDonald's.
Okay.
I told their construction guy said, no more mansards, wherever they can get rid of them, they're getting rid of them.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Okay, so I thought it was done. Okay. I don't know what it is. Item B, is Hampton Inn, another exterior modification presentation.
For the record, my name is Matthew Gibson, and I do hereby solemnly swear to tell the truth. May I approach the commission?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, lady and gentlemen of the commission, and ladies and gentlemen of the gallery, I'm here today to share with you not only my job, but also my passion, and that's improving the quality of the Hampton Inn. Now, you have in front of you the plans, palettes, as well as the architectural layout for the exterior, which are a result of nearly a year of careful planning on our part. Now, when we took over the property, it was our goal to create something that belonged in Taos, that was a part of Taos. When we did that, we flew out our designer to Taos to see not only the spaces that she'd be designing for, but also the spaces she was designing around the town of Taos and the surrounding area. And you can see in the palettes the result of that work and that effort, that investment. From the guest rooms to the corridors, and even the lobby. You can see the colors, the textures, and the materials which are emblematic of the town of Taos and of the Southwest more generally. The exterior plan, for which I'm woefully sorry I don't have a copy myself to show the gallery, is very much a reflection of that same image. Oh, Dinah, please. If I may recruit a volunteer. Yes, sir. If you'd be so kind. I hope you saw. And members of the commission, you do have your copy. Correct. As the gallery can see, we're taking what already exists, these gorgeous columns that float from the bottom to the top, as well as these entryways, the porte-cochere is the word for it, and highlighting those authentic aspects, the columns in a dark kind of foreground, the background rendered lighter. So not only does it draw the eye to those columns, but then during the sunrise and the sunset, these most beautiful times in Taos, they blend together and create something organic, something beautiful, something more than the sum of their parts. Even the entryway is clad in stacked stone, so that even when our guests first arrive, come out of their cars, they're reminded very much of the earth around them, the nature and the beauty of Taos. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me see what the other commissioners have to say. Do you have any comments? I was wondering, you show these rounded corbels at the top of the columns?
Yes, sir.
Is that a remodel?
No, sir. Those are existing on the current building.
So basically, well, we don't have charge in this commission of your interior, although I do like your color boards. They seem
Thank you, sir.
well
We
blended.
felt it was very much a cohesive whole, and so the context of the interior kind of illuminated our decisions on the exterior.
So basically, other than the cladding of the porte-cochere, you're leaving the structure as it is, and you're just recoloring. Is that
Correct. The structure itself is perfectly beautiful, very much a part of what Taos is. But we want to highlight those aspects that are most prominent and bring kind of more attention to them.
So what's happening at the headers of the windows? Is that just, are they just plain, or are they going to get a color?
I'm sorry.
The lintels over the windows, the exposed beam.
As I recall, they're being painted that same brown color that's present, the Sherwin-Williams.
Oh,
if I'm not
because
mistaken.
they're colorless in this drawing.
I'm sorry, may I
Sure.
take a look? have a rather large copy.
These here, is that colored the same?
I was under the impression it's colored the same. That being said, it's not part of the drawing, so I don't want to speak in any official capacity to that respect.
Well, it's just as a suggestion, it just seemed like maybe if you had a little bit more of this brown, the red brown, possibly use it in a place like that, it might, it just, you didn't use, you used two dominant colors and the third color is just very sparse.
Sort of an accent, certainly.
Yeah, and maybe you could accent a few more things, but that's just an aesthetic thing.
Of course.
So it's up to you guys. I mean, looks fine to me. Was that an improvement?
I just had a quick question.
Of course.
The exterior, there we're seeing what appear to be the architecture associated with corbels and supporting beams. Are these, what material? Are we looking at stucco for all of this, or is there any wood in here? It's just that the type is very small on this reduced, so I'm unable to read it. So,
I must apologize.
just if you can give me just a little rundown of the materials for the exterior. Is it all stucco?
It's predominantly stucco, yes, ma'am.
And even the posts and even the supportive.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And glass, of course.
Naturally, yes.
And then what appear to be lintels over the windows, those lintels are not wood, are they? Or are they?
I don't believe so.
The headers over the windows.
Yes. Then,
Yeah.
In that case, yes. Yes. I do believe there's a wooden
There
top.
wood?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Okay. Well, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah. Okay.
And if the commission has any other questions, any concerns that should arise in the future, of course, we're more than happy to entertain them. This is a community that we care very much for, and we're looking to make quite a permanent investment in.
Yeah. There is, just for clarity, there's no change in the amount of units, there are no additions, there's no remodel.
No, ma'am.
It is,
well, I should say there is a remodel
All right.
of the interior, nothing of the exterior,
All right.
for clarification's sake.
All right. Thank you very much, then.
Of course.
Thank you. Good luck with your project.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay. So, now we come to the public hearing. There's a possibility that these next two items will be what's it called when they, I'm at a loss for words. You're going to maybe appealed. So I've been asked that, and it may go before, it's supposed to go before town council, and not necessarily to the P&Z, but depending on the choice of the owners, or the applicants, they may. So I've been asked that if there are any town councilors present or P&Z people, now you can correct me. I mean, maybe they can stay but not having a voice, but there is that. So I don't know. I don't really know the procedure. I'm at a loss. Could you help me with that, please?
Yes, I'm not sure, this being my third day, what the appeal body would be if someone were to appeal your decision. My feeling is that it would go to the town council and not to planning and zoning.
Okay.
Having said that, if it does go to planning and zoning, and a planning and zoning commissioner were to speak for or against the project, I believe they would need to recuse themselves
At that
from
time.
hearing that appeal.
But what about just attending? Should they?
I don't
be
believe
asked-
attending, I think attending is all right. Speaking might not be all right if, in fact.
Okay. So, according to our new planning director, Mr. Hahn? And if it's okay with the applicant, I mean, you know. Are you going to address that?
I'm going to try to answer the question.
Okay, thank you.
The appeal process is to a decision of the code administrator that refers to the planning commission in regards to 1612-080B. I'm sorry, that's an 8. Any appeal of the decision of this body is to the governing body of the town council. So it would not be, we raised this issue already earlier today, would not be a conflict of interest for a member sitting on the planning commission to testify before this body at this time.
Okay, and then also, what about the physical presence in the assembly? Is that okay, both of the town councilor and the, well, now it's just
as long
the
as
town
they do
council.
not participate directly in the proceedings in any way that might prejudice them in the appeal.
Okay. You can stay if you don't say anything for Mr. Hahn, the counselor. No. Well, it's trying to be courteous and proper is sometimes can be a conflict. Okay, so then we have before us case number HPC 2015-5, and it's a Certificate of Appropriateness is the title of it. I think the title of it should be demolition, but I'll let staff give a recommendation, if you would, please, or what are your findings?
Okay, staff recommendation. Staff recommends that this certificate of appropriateness request be denied based upon previous conditions placed on this property by the Historic Preservation Commission and based upon the review by the State Historic Preservation Office. Any recommendations other than denial should cite the findings and recommendations made by the State Historic Preservation Office.
Okay. And then we have a, well, I'll go ahead then and let them present their case at this time.
Okay, we have property owner is Del Norte Properties with agent Glen M. Tarleton. And I believe that he has Mark Yarovitz here as well as his agent. So if one of you, I'm not sure who's going to do the presentation.
Dinah.
You swear to tell the truth?
My name is Mark Yarovitz. I swear to tell the truth. I have a, before we go forward, I've read the report from previous planning director, and I read the report from SHPO, and I just have a technical question to begin with. We did meet out there today and do a site visit, and the outcome of what we want to approach here may be a little bit different than approve or deny at this point. In any event, the question I have is, as I looked through the documentation of the historical cultural property inventory, and I read the letters, the conflict to me is between the historic district and the historic overlay. And as I read through the documents in here, I see that that SHPO does recommend that these buildings not be considered for demolition. And they also quote in here, it says here, while these two properties are located outside the Taos Historic District, they are considered historic and have been identified as contributing structures to the local Taos Historic Overlay District. And what I'm asking for is some documentation showing that, or notifying the owners that this is the case. As I read through the application and the documentations from the Town of Taos, when this was done, there's an affidavit from the owner in here that you have, where the question of historic and contributing buildings was questioned, and in both cases, the owners have checked off, no, I do not want my buildings to have a contributing designation, and this was done in, I can't read the date on that. And then as I read through the inventory list,
Now, excuse me, is that referring to both buildings or one of the two buildings?
both buildings. There's an
Oh, I don't have
affidavit
that.
for both buildings making that,
And who made that statement?
the owner sitting here for the first property, and the signature on the other one was the owner of the time of record for that other property.
Well, the only one I have is the written one on the 404. I don't have, by Mr. Fox, Mr. Eric Tarleton Fox. I don't have one by,
This was part of the,
well, may I see it?
Okay, I'm sorry.
It wasn't in my packet.
you know, and the outcome of whatever we do with these buildings is still a question, but as I read through the information here, it clearly asks the questions on here. This is for both properties. Is property individually listed on a register? No. Individually listed on SRCP? No. Individually listed on NRHP? No. If not listed, is it eligible? No. And as I worked with Mr. Tarleton on this project, I asked him over and over again before we came here, are these contributing properties in the historic district? And he said, no, we did not want them to be when they were asked during that inventory time. There are affidavits that you see in front of you that were signed, I don't know what year it was, I can't tell from there, but it looks like 10, 12 years ago or more. I can't be sure from the date. But my real question is where and when, how does the owner of a property get notified that it's contributing versus what they thought it always was? Because all of the requests in here have to do with contributing, and then the mention by SHPO that they are considered historic and have been identified as contributing. I would just like to know how and where that happens.
Well, I'll try to
Okay.
explain it to you. The state has one map or one zone for Taos that was done in, I believe, around the 50s, a good 50-odd years ago. And the town has a larger zone, which we call the historic overlay zone. And the buildings are in that zone. And, and when the studies were done for the state, they had two classifications of buildings in their parcel. One was called significant and one was called contributing. But there were other buildings, obviously, that were not, but they're still in the zone. They're still within that territory. These buildings are within our overlay historic zone.
So that makes them automatically contributing.
No, this just makes them significant. It makes them, you want to classify them, they're old buildings that need to be preserved. They're in the historic preservation zone. And you're splitting hairs. We've already told you we want you to save them. And now you're trying to split hairs of why you're not going to save them, why you've neglected them. That's what the issue is, I believe.
Might I add to this?
Sure.
I'd like to draw your attention to the letter, and that is dated March 10th, 2015. This is from the State of New Mexico, Department of Cultural Affairs, Historic Preservation Division. At the end of our last meeting, there was a motion, a determination on the part of the commission that we wish to know how the state felt about this. So this letter is the letter that states how they feel about this. And three-quarter down the page, I'll just read it. While these two properties are located outside the Taos Historic District, NRHP, they are considered historic and have been identified as contributing structures to the local Taos Historic Overlay District, which is what Chairman Palacios just mentioned. It is now confirmed with the state. It is likely that a future NRHP nomination update, that with a future update, they could fall inside the boundary and then be considered contributing structures to the NRHP district. Next paragraph, the Historic Preservation Division recommends that these buildings not be considered for demolition. Demolition would result in further erosion of the historic character of this primary street in downtown Taos. HPD requests that every option for these buildings' preservation be considered and evaluated. And this is from the state, and this is what we wish to know, all of us, in the last meeting, which very much aligns with the sentiments expressed at the last meeting, which are videotaped.
Correct.
So I hope that this eliminates and clarifies for you any confusion about the significance of these buildings.
It doesn't necessarily, as Mr. Palacios identified, if we decide to appeal any of this, splitting hairs is what it is all about. And I was just wondering how the property owners, where the notification process goes from they considered it non-contributing in this district for all these years, and the affidavit they signed when the inventory was done many years ago, to now it's considered contributing. And my question really was about the procedure by which an owner would be told that his property is such.
There's no confusion. This issue was up before the commission last year. At that time, the owners were clearly, all of us were very clear, it's in that meeting, that these two buildings are in the historical overlay. In addition, at the conclusion of that presentation, it was very, very clear that, and it was made clear by this commission, that there were certain conditions that the owner of these both properties needed to meet. And they are once again repeated in this packet, and they were discussed in the last meeting last month. There's no confusion on whether this needed to be done or what their historic identification was or whether they were in the overlay. And as a result of a series of these meetings, the owner, yourself, and whoever participated in these presentations the criteria was made very clear. This is notification is more than notification. Now it remained for the owners of these of the property to comply with what the commission requested. That compliance has not happened.
If I may correct you on one of the facts, the previous application, which was reviewed and approved for an apartment complex on this property with conditions that those buildings remain intact, has since been abandoned, and so are those conditions. We have no plans for the property at the moment, and so all conditions on those buildings are, as they stay, are a new concept. We have no plans that are approved on the project right now, so the conditions of keeping them there are now void. And that was identified in the letter by Mr. Bellis to you. Correct, Mr. Bellis?
That is correct. The application has terminated by lack of being moved on and voluntarily withdrawn by the applicant, and therefore the conditions relating to that are withdrawn. I believe that the commission is relating that they previously made a determination about the same property irrelevant of whether the other half of the project moves forward.
To answer, Mr. Chair, if I might, your technical or legal question, the form you're referring to that the owner fills out is simply a voluntary best guess, do you know whether it has historic significance, and asks, in fact, whether you want to be included with the goal that when sufficient funds are available, those houses can be surveyed and it can be documented whether they have historic value and what the cause of that historic value would be, whether it's architectural or because of who lived in the house. The earliest study, as is indicated in the letter by SHPO and in our discussion with them, was a rather small historic district because there were very limited funds. The overlay was done because the town had to qualify with the state as a certified local government, and by doing that, they have to have a historic commission, they have to have an ordinance to protect historic structures, and they have to be willing to periodically examine what is relevant and what isn't to the district. And as was said, it's been more than, basically you have to be more than 50 years old as this building, and it's been more than 50 years since the original survey was done, so certainly there'll be new buildings. The town has not done that. There was an earlier attempt that the state did not accept as being fully comprehensive on it. But the final determination in the state of New Mexico, as it is with most states, as to the historic value of a building is set by the state statute, which determines that the State Historic Preservation Office, any construction that you want to do, that, and as you know, when we go to the county, it's automatic whether you're, and there is no historic district, but they require that, you know, you swear as to the archaeological value, and if you find anything, you have to provide a notification, but you also have to get a letter.
Right.
It could be Walmart, but
We do a lot
Walmart
of
still has to
studies.
get a letter from SHPO. So the realization is that most small municipalities do not have the capacity over time to do the necessary work. In fact, this town actually has put in for a grant, which is now in effect, to expand the inventory and do that work. So we rely under the state statute upon a caveat that exists within our ordinance that allows that this commission or the staff, if they feel it in investigating a property for a certificate of appropriateness, which is demolition in this case, has a question about that they can ask the state to make that determination. In this case, the state has made the determination that while not in the district, it does have historic significance and could be included in the future inventory of properties.
Could be, okay.
So, but
I think more than that, let me clarify, Mr. Chairman, I think they say probably should be. So I think that's where the commission gets its stand from at this point.
well, and then, if I may, you received a letter from the town, and it was signed by you, Mr. Bellis, and on page 2 of that letter, there are preservation requirements of all, it doesn't say significant or otherwise, all properties within a historic overlay zone shall be responsible for the preservation and maintenance of all buildings and structures on their property to prevent decay and deterioration. Owners shall repair buildings or structures if they are found to have any of the following defects. Number 1, we're splitting hairs.
Okay,
1,
continue.
deterioration or failing foundation. Number 2, deteriorated or failing flooring and floor structure. 3, deterioration of failing walls, whether structural, load-bearing, or non-load-bearing. 4, deterioration of failing roofs, ceilings, porches, portales, and other buildings and other structures such as, but not limited to, fireplaces, chimneys, doors, so forth. 5, deterioration or failing of plaster or roof membranes. 6, should the structural adequacy of a building or a structure become suspect, the owner shall provide a code administrator written document prepared by a licensed engineer as such. But I find you guys negligent, regardless, for the last, since you've come before us, of the first 5 items. You're not taking care of your buildings at all. whether they're significant or otherwise. They're in that zone. They're in the town. And since they've been unoccupied, you're, and it's come before us, not just by you, but before, where people do demolition by neglect. And I think that's what you're doing. We went to the building today. They're fine. I've worked on worse buildings than that. Please, with less foundation than that. And they're standing and they're invaluable, man. It's like you have a beautiful. We're trying to help you, and you're like demolishing part of the character of this town, and that's what bugs me. And you're doing it by not taking care of them, and you're using all this jargon, in my opinion. Anyway, I would actually, at this time, Diana, could you read Bill Christmas's letter, or would you read it?
Yeah, I would. What I would caution is that this is a communication that staff were asked to read by Mr. William Christmas, who is a member of the commission. But since he is not present, and he would be if he was here making a decision, this is to be read as a citizen, not as a member of the Planning Commission. And he states, I am strongly opposed to approving the demolition of the two buildings in question. They are contributing structures to the historic district, despite what Mr. Tarleton might think. They have come to their present state of ruin because of long-time neglect by the owner. In reviewing the past summaries of appearances before both the HPC and PZ commissions, it is clear that there has been misrepresentation of the future plans and misleading statements concerning the two properties in question. The owner and his agents appear to subscribe to the idea that they can wear down the commission and in this way gain the ultimate objectives of demolishing the two houses. It is my opinion that the HPC should stand firm against the request. What I would ask is the letter that, Mr. Chairman, that you mentioned, because Mr. Yarvitz did ask a specific question, when is the owner notified? In fact, the statute requires that that letter that was read that I did send, that if we seek or believe that there might be historical significance, that we have to send that letter to you. But I would also, on behalf of the defense of the applicant here, state that I can find no record that indicates at any earlier time that the town had issued a similar letter or a notice of violation to the owner indicating that they were required to make repairs to the property. So this would have been the first notification to the owner that it had historical value and that under that finding that repairs to the building could be should be made and could be mandated by the town.
Okay.
But I would also like to add, Mr. Chairman, that because I think Mr. Yarvitz alluded to it before we get too far along, is that there was an earlier site visit at which time I asked Julie Scansey, who is serving as our acting building official, and myself and Mr. Tarleton and Mr. Yarvitz were nice enough to allow us to go over and see the buildings and actually crawl under the footings and get in there, because we wanted to make a fair determination, not just from a historic value, but from a construction standpoint as to the soundness of the buildings. And certainly not on the original home of Mr. Tarleton and where the Dragonfly was in the pizzeria, but the other building, there had been a water problem in the basement, and some of the sand had pulled away, the dirt had pulled away from the foundation, and that had caused some sagging on one of the walls. In addition, where I believe the ovens were in the other building, there had been some sagging on the floor, and Mr. Tarleton had indicated that they had had to get under there and put some jacks under that floor. Ms. Scansey is available to provide her opinion as the construction official as to the two buildings. But the applicant at that time, we had some discussions and as to the overall development of the property. And I don't think this is a straight thumbs up or thumbs down. What I was hoping is that I believe that there might be an area for compromise here that may preserve one or both buildings, to repurpose them. And there might be a development plan that, when I go back through the records of the Planning Commission, it appeared, as yourselves, it appeared that the approval of the rear of the property for the apartments did factor in to the preservation of the buildings in front, because what those that made the decision at that time did not want was a streetscape that looked into a parking lot in the historic district, and that's your gateway right there, or to a blank wall of windows on an apartment building. So that acted as a visual and historic buffer to the rear of the property. So what I had suggested to the applicant, and I think they're prepared to do, is offer some options that might satisfy what they feel financially they need to do to make the property viable, and maybe also to address some of the concerns of the Historic Commission. The one thing I would ask is that this is, at this time, a single parcel of property, and I think that to make the judgment as to what you do in the front of the property, while your jurisdiction on it is limited as a Historic Commission and that the Planning and Zoning Commission, whether you are Historic Commissioner P&Z or staff, you would certainly want to know what the intended use for the rear of the property is. Because unlike many of the street front properties, for example, the ale house across the street, which I thought was probably in way worse condition than the house that had the dragonfly in it, has been repurposed and is extremely popular. While it still needs work, that business, as it becomes more viable, has taken on some of that work. But one of those restrictions they have, and most of the frontage properties have, is parking. And then also that ability to not be right on the sidewalk, to not be, as we are with Michael's, that you're right up front to the curb, and you're changing the historic feature where, when you look at the older properties, they were set back. They were homes originally, most of them on the north side, outside of the core. So they had yards to them, and that meant they had a tree. In this case, there's an acacia in the front. But that feature has actually become an asset in that increasingly we're a town that has what the dragonfly was, these cabaret features, which is very popular commercially, and is something that I think gives that property a uniqueness and maybe a value that needs to be preserved. But they also have rear property, and if they're developing that for residential and have parking, they also have the potential to provide off-street parking to those commercial operations, or to have a little yard in the back and sort of do like what K-Tow does, or what the Taos Inn does, of having a back piece that takes some of that people traffic off of the front and creates an intimate space to the business in the back. With that, Mr. Chair, I guess if we could hear what the applicant.
Well, if I may add, excuse me, then after what you said, then would you please state what is your intent with that property?
The intent would be to redesign and resubmit an application for apartment complex beyond those first two buildings.
So it's the same, basically the same program. You
Same
still want to
program
build
with the different-
apartments.
Yes, apartments is the main goal, totally different design, of course, but same end result.
Okay, thank you.
While keeping the two existing structures.
The jury is out at the moment, and however this
I guess I
goes.
misunderstood the question, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I think what many of this commission are struggling with is, what is the overall vision, and what are the parameters for your project to be a success, and we're being asked to offer an opinion on that. That's our volunteer job. That's what we do. And I have not sat on this commission for as long as some of the other members. I have yet to see what your vision is. All I've been asked to do is to vote a thumbs up or a thumbs down on the demolition of these two buildings. That's it. I've never seen a site plan. I've never seen any renderings. I have not seen a program, a business plan of what you want to do, and I think that's okay. But I would like to offer this, that I think if the applicant were to present the bigger picture, it would help us make a decision. Right now, we're just being simply asked to vote yes or no on whether these buildings, whether it's appropriate to demo these buildings.
Correct.
I don't know what, I've seen some sketches outside of a formal setting here, but Mr. Tarleton and Mr. Yerovitz, I've yet to see a site plan indicating here's 18 units with the buildings intact, and here's 21 units with the buildings gone. And as a person trained on how to read drawings, I would like to see that, and I can't force you to do that. All you're here asking us to do is, can we demo these buildings? And without more information, I have a hard time entertaining any other discussion. I don't know what you want to do back there. I haven't seen it. I think it would support your case if you presented that information. That's all I'm going to say.
We accept what you've said and agree that that's part of our process. I want to also admit that the approval that we struggled to get through previous on the other apartment designs, we've come not to like them for a variety of reasons, and think that the opinions you offered us at the previous meeting were more valid than not, and we have scrapped the entire design as it didn't match any of the, if we were to rebuild an apartment complex in that area to come close to matching what an old building would look like built new as an apartment complex, our previous design did not meet those. Even though you gave us an approval, we scrapped them for a variety of reasons, including, just to say on the record, I thought they came out ugly. And so we scrapped those plans, and as we went through to redesign this project, we came up with the conclusion when I asked Mr. Tarleton, so are these or are these not contributing? We went through that exercise. He says, not that I'm aware of. I don't know what that issue is. Now it's been corrected, and we've been educated in terms of what this process is and how. Again, I asked him. So yes, we would like to resubmit a site plan with some elevations of what the apartment complex would look like. I suppose there has to be multiple varieties of plans, and what I was hoping for, and I would like to see if that's possible. And again, if you're denying this application, that's fine. What we'd like is a work study opportunity to show a couple of varieties of what the apartment complex with the buildings or without the buildings, or if there's any in-between conversation we can have. We'd like to go through with that, because this is an important property to the family. Its location in town, it's an infill property. All the other things we know that we need, apartments, residential, that's all irrelevant to the question on hand today. And my assumption is, based upon all the comments, that you're going to deny this. That's fine. We're not going to appeal that decision. We'd rather come back with some drawings to show Commissioner Henry and the rest of you what we would like to go forward with, and see how that comes out. It's not an easy project to develop because of the buildings, where they sit, the condition they are in, et cetera, and whether or not they're responsible for the deterioration or not. That can be argued outside of this successfully. So what I have here is the first of a drawing that we're not willing to, I could show you what it looks like, but it's not anything we're willing to present yet. It's just some work that we put together based upon the outcome of what this was. So if the outcome is no, then, and we're required to keep those buildings, we'll have to work within those parameters. If there's something else we can do in terms of remodeling them and incorporate maybe one of them into the apartment complex, that could be a possibility also. I don't know yet. So we came back with the application because we were starting with a clean slate again. The previous set of plans were abandoned for all those reasons stated. And if we were approved to do what we were going to do because of whatever the idiosyncrasies that would have allowed it or not, then we could plan out the rest of the property and present you with something. So given what we know today, I would still like to schedule a work study to go over some of these issues in terms of how that would work.
So it's getting complex.
This does keep getting tied to a project behind these two buildings, and yet what's up before this commission is yes or no on the demolition of these buildings. This we deferred a month. We're back here again, and now in this discussion, but your application and all of that, what I'm hearing, just to be clear, is that we need to start from scratch. All of that is behind us, and it sounds like a new application needs to come in. Is that correct? For this project? I just want to make that clear.
Yes, from the planning and
Yes.
zoning side, definitely.
Yes, okay. So that the slate is wiped clean.
Correct.
And all we're looking at today, without looking at the project in the back, are these two buildings.
Correct.
Right. So, but we are spending some time talking about this project in the back. Why is that?
One of your commissioners asked.
It's relevant. You can't say it's not relevant, but I do agree with Commissioner Choma that we've been asked to make a real simple black and white decision tonight.
That's fine.
my understanding. Yes or no? Is it appropriate to demolish these buildings? I'm willing to
Correct.
Well,
vote on that.
I would like to go a step further and say that that relevancy has to do with demolition for the sake of the project that is proposed for the back.
Sure.
Right. And it's not a matter of, are these buildings worthy to keep? It's not, all of these things are falling somehow by the wayside in favor of a project that was proposed last year. And now we're looking at demolishing for a project, to 18 to 20 unit project behind there, which is not yet before us. There's something here in that.
Sure. Yes, I agree.
So the other thing is that I really do wish to make clear, and it is in the, what we have here in the documentation. The last site plan and the last plans I saw was for a LEED Platinum 18 to 20 unit apartment complex that employed an architectural style that is not per code, at this point in code, in our code book, allowed in the historical overlay. And that's another little thing to be looking at. So when this project came up before us, it was tied into these changes, it was tied into keeping these buildings. All of that was foregone. None of that was acted upon. Now the slate is wiped clean. With the passage of time, it's interesting how things change. These buildings have been neglected and allowed to become even worse, perhaps really for the sake of this, could be postulated for the project that is thought to be behind. And yet we still have to address what that final architectural style is going to be, and we're not here today to look at that project, are we? But so much of this demolition and this discussion has to do with the project in the back. And now, what's really before us is, do we demolish these buildings for the project in the back? That is the larger picture, is it not? And I'd really welcome some commentary on this, because the perspective is shifting a bit. And let's be clear, as long as we're doing whatever we're doing here, let's be clear about why we're doing it. That's all I suggest.
Thank you. Thank you. You had a zone change within the last, since this came before us as a project, when we asked you guys to save worthwhile buildings, and now, and you changed it from a C2?
It was a split zone.
A split zone. And why did you do that?
The the difficulty of the, I'm trying to remember, the project, the difficulty of following the code from both C2 and the R14, and where the property was split by the zoning line.
Which doesn't matter, right?
It did matter.
Well, I'm just saying, it's a zoning deal.
In other words, even if we keep the two buildings in front, one of the apartment buildings was crossing over the commercial line,
Okay,
and thereby would require an entire set of approvals different than the R14. So we asked for complete R14 on the project so we could focus on what it's to be, which is strictly residential. There is no commercial goals at the time.
but you also, I think, asked for some kind of a certificate of appropriateness to keep those, the commercial value of those buildings in the front. You asked for a variance or whatever.
No, they were allowed to be grandfathered in as existing commercial buildings in the R14 zone. It wasn't a request on our part, that's how it was delivered.
Okay, so.
Existing non-compliant use.
Correct.
That's fine, that's great.
But you also could have achieved the same thing by a lot line adjustment and without changing the zoning. And I think that causes the town to be a little concerned that you were anticipating coming back here to do this and basically demo the
Absolutely
buildings
not.
from our residential use.
Absolutely not. The first time the evaluation of those two buildings and the rehabilitation of those brought in by a team with Mr. Tarleton of building experts of what it would take to rehab these buildings was pretty devastating to the family and the owners of what was involved with the rehab at that time, which is why we discussed the idea, can we demolish? Then the question is, we looked at the rehab and all of that, leaving them as non-conforming buildings in the location, still be allowed for commercial use if we wanted, or converted to fully residential if we wanted. But the budget and the conversation with the team that Mr. Tarleton brought in to look at these buildings was overwhelming from an economic standpoint, a difficult proposition. So the next question to him was, are these contributing? Why don't we just tear them down? Can we tear them down? And the application went in, period. Now, given all the information we have today and what's going on, we're redirecting the process to come up with a repurposing of the project, and we didn't know whether or not the buildings were going to be mandated to stay, as you're discussing here, or not. That was never a final decision. And the request, this was the first time the request was for a demo of these buildings. Prior to all of this, we had no intention of demoing them, but after the economic review of all of that, it became clear that this was a request to see if it was possible. If it's not, then we have to look at what we have and continue moving forward. That's basically what it's about.
So,
Your simple question is to approve or deny tonight and say yes or no, and then we're done. We can move on.
I'd like to hear from
okay, so, Mr. Ballas, at this time, in terms of procedure, do we ask for a motion? Or is it proper to ask for discussion from we have a number of citizens here that appear to want to speak. I've heard it both ways, that the discussion sometimes is made after the motion and sometimes it's made before the motion. So I would like your input on that, please.
The discussion from the public, since this is a public hearing, we actually have procedures that are outlined, which is that the staff introduces the project, the applicant presents their case, you then open it to the public for them to speak. You then close it to the public, allow the staff to present their findings and recommendations, and then you close it so that you discuss amongst yourselves whether you would entertain a motion.
Separately from here or right here? What do you mean? Discuss amongst ourselves. What does that mean?
But it means that at that point, you make a motion and then there's a second. It's open for discussion amongst yourselves. we and the audience can't then participate and get up and go, oh, I disagree with you.
Okay, all right.
You can ask someone as a witness to come back up and clarify that.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else you gentlemen want to add at this time, or there is? Okay.
I would like to
I don't know.
I would like to come up after all the speakers are, but it's clear that you're going to deny the application, and we're okay with that. We can just proceed. If you want to go through all of the discussion, that's fine too. I'd like to hear some of the input, but we're prepared for what we understand to be your vote going forward based upon the staff recommendation and the conversation we've just had. And after you do that, then I would like to discuss a workshop to see what we can or cannot do with the property. It's a difficult property.
Okay, then wait till then. Okay. I feel it's fair to have the public, I know you want to go. We have other things to do. Please keep it short. I mean, we don't want to be here till 9 o'clock or anything close to that. So, anybody like to speak? Because I don't want to go against everybody, the tide, so to speak.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, and the penalty of perjury?
I do.
Please read your name into the record.
My name is John Durham, and I'm the reason we had the discussion at the beginning of the evening about whether it was appropriate for planning commissioners to speak this evening. I've been assured that I'm speaking as a citizen, not as a planning commissioner. And if there is any kind of appeal, which Mark claims there won't be, I'd like that to go into the record, that the appeal would not come before Planning Commission. And I've also cleared with Rick that if there is a site plan or special improvement plan that comes before the Planning Commission, that would be considered a separate issue from tonight. So anything I say tonight would not influence my ability to participate in a further planning commission related to this. I am going to be short. I had a lot of distress this weekend when I found out about the demolition permit being before the town. I take this thing very seriously. I don't even live in the town, but every day when I approach the town from the north, I enjoy that incredible streetscape we have of old adobes along Paseo del Pueblo Norte. It actually starts out by SIDS, and if you'll notice, there's rarely an empty building in there. The structures themselves may not be significant. They may not make a major contribution to the district, but they're an incremental part of the whole, if you will. It's like knocking 2 front teeth out of somebody's mouth. You're going to miss them. I would state here, and I heard a couple things this evening that really pleased me, and one was that the staff is against the demolition. I'm hearing that the Preservation Commission is leaning toward denial of the request. There's a letter from the state recommending denial. I think you're going to hear from other people in the community that don't want to see this come down. And I would just add at the ending, I'm very much in favor of downtown housing. That's not the issue. I very much want to see what that new site plan looks like. But I would ask you, this is a town full of creative people. And I would ask you to be creative with those two structures. Perhaps the apartment leasing office could be in one of them. Perhaps one could be a community building if you plan to do more of a condo complex and have amenities for the residents. But I very much disagree with the request to demolish those buildings and would ask you to put a little thought and creativity as we go forward. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Baker, and I always tell the truth.
What's your name, please, again? What's your name?
Your name?
Your name, you were down on the,
Sorry, I have a cold. Lawrence Baker.
thank you.
Okay. So there are quite a few people here I know who are against this project. I was prepared to read some statements also, but I won't do that since it seems to be clear where this is all going. For the new project, the new buildings, obviously the old buildings should stay there. I would like to urge the developers to put a really nice green buffer between them and what is going to go behind. I think that the owners should immediately rehab these buildings in some way so that they don't deteriorate anymore. There are other buildings, it's a very bad precedent to set to allow owners to let these buildings deteriorate and then come and say, oh, they're gone, we have to tear them down. I think if I remember years ago, and I don't know whether it's still in effect, the feds would give a 25% discount to people who rehabbed old buildings. So a building that is at least 25% viable, or just even partially viable, could be designated as an historic building or whatever the rules were. Anyway, so I think the commission, I know how they're going to vote. I commend you for doing that. I hope you stay very vigilant for the coming time for what does get built, what doesn't get torn down. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Anybody else? Please step forward.
My name is Karen Chertok, and I swear to tell the truth. This makes me very nervous to speak here because I have not lived in Taos for very long. But
Excuse me?
yes.
Excuse me, could you please speak into that microphone?
Sorry.
Thank you. I can't hear you from here, I'm sorry. Thank
that
you.
okay?
Yes,
Okay.
so I can hear you.
That being said, the first thing that I would like to say is I would just like to provide some information for the owners. The National Trust for Historic Preservation funds seed grants that encourage preservation at the local level by providing seed money for preservation projects. These grants help stimulate public discussion, enable local groups to gain technical expertise. I'm sorry, I'm so nervous.
That's all right.
They focus on building sustainable communities, which includes cultural sustainability. This includes reimagining historic sites, creating new models for historic site preservation and stewardship, and promoting diversity of place. A small grant at the right time can go a long way and is often the catalyst that inspires a community to take action on a preservation project. And I'm getting emotional because I will tell you, I have since about March 15th been talking, my goal was 5 people a day. The people of Taos do not want those buildings demolished. And we have to mention that one of them was Dr. Kilgore's house. Dr. Kilgore was such an integral part of this community. And when I see on the agenda that it's listed as commercial, and as a layperson, I'm looking at that house thinking, this is some kind of craftsman stucco Taosish thing. This is an amazing building. And there are ideas and people who would love to be involved in a project. I can write a federal grant myself, which is why I started asking people. And I've spoken to maybe 50 people, and people are appalled that it's even possible that this building might be torn down. And 3 people that I spoke to were right across the street at the restaurant, and 2 of them said, I don't live here, I don't have an opinion. And one of them said, well, yeah, I could see some kind of condos or something, but height would be very important. And I did notice that there was no discussion of height, and I don't know what the plans are for your project in the back, but...
2-story.
2-story? Also, as far as the front properties go, there are ideas that are so creative that are out there. And Dr. Kilgore there's such anthropological significance of what he did in that venue, which really was a home, that to tear them down, I think, would be devastating. But there are ideas like, there are people who would love to see those homes be some type of shelter. It could be a residential treatment center. You could call it the doctor is in, I-N-N. You know, that's Taos. Those are ideas. So maybe rather than it being owners against, commission or owners against house, it should be, hey, maybe this could be a project that could really inflame the community. Thank you.
Since I've been here for the whole meeting. My name is Stephen Kilborn, and I live in the contributing area in Mary Cabot's old house. I'm against the demolition, but I don't really understand why the discussion got off on plans and things. That's I'm a big fan of Robert's Rules of Order, and I thought that the purpose was to just discuss whether it was going to be demolished or not. I didn't think all this discussion was actually necessary, but I don't know how your meetings go.
Right.
As to architecture and all this sort of thing. So that's it. Thank you for the work you do.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, could I suggest that there's a couple of options for you here? The applicant could ask the chair to withdraw the application, and they've indicated they kind of know what the outcome is. You could table it, but I don't think that serves their purposes or yours at this point. They're looking for some direction. But you could you could approve it. You could approve it with conditions. You could deny it outright. I would ask that there be the opportunity for some informal dialogue, in a work session with staff and yourselves in regards to this property. It is a unique property. There's very rarely a piece of land that is entirely vacant, as this one is for most of the property. Also has access to the main thoroughfare, has historic value. There's just tremendous potential for this, and how that, as Commissioner Chama said before, the design of a multifamily residential unit, which is not consistent with that surrounding neighborhood anywhere, is both needed, but also could be kind of a death knell to that neighborhood if not done properly. So I think there's a community. We now have a planning director, an experienced planning director. I think this is one of those opportunities, as you saw in two earlier presentations, where we've had workshops on Mondo Italiano, on wanting to see buildings outside the zone have a better compatibility with structures that are here. That when we work with the applicant, we do have the ability to come up with something better for the community.
Okay. It's a fresh project. It's starting all over again. Would you like to comment on that, Mr. Lewis? Is there anything you would like to say?
Sure, I agree with Rick. I think having a work session to discuss some of the options for the property, to have a running dialogue is a good idea. I think there are some good ideas that could come out of that. I would encourage that. I don't yet know how those are scheduled, whether we'd have them during the day or at a regularly scheduled meeting, but either way, I think it's a good idea.
Okay.
No, not
You already said what you wanted to do.
Well, I think Rick opened. If I could speak, Mr. Chairman, I think the town manager just gave the agent an opportunity that is a good compromise, but one that, again, I think pushes down the road when we have the work session, when we look at a new plan. Is one of these buildings going to be demolished? And
One or both.
One or both. And I just wanted to express that.
You know, that may be something to look at in the future, but what's right before us at this moment is yay or nay on demolition of these buildings. And with what's before us right now, I think we can say, hey, there isn't enough before us to say yes. That's all. It's really that simple. If we wish in this meeting to tie it up to other things and discuss this more, fine. But today, we cannot say, based on everything that's come before us, yes, we can go ahead and demolish these buildings. And I would like to at least end this meeting with some sort of comment, statement, and determination, and not head into yet another delay, another month. At this point in time, with what we have before us, we have had the state speak, we have had a review of code, we have had the recommendation of staff, and this commission. And I, for one, would like to go ahead and make a motion on where we stand with the demolition of these buildings right now. I would like to propose that.
Okay, I think that we did say we would let the owner's rep close up. And Mr. Tarleton, did you want to say something?
I think Martha wants to make a final statement here. And,
Make it brief, dude. Okay, let's.
my discussion with Mr. Tarleton was that we would like to withdraw the application. If
Thank
you
you.
want to still vote on it, either way, that's your privy, but as Mr. Bellis allowed, I think that we understand what's going on, and we would just withdraw the application, but that's my final point.
Thank you.
Good, thank you.
I want to footnote it. If I'm, what's that?
Just a point for clarification, there are two separate applications, so you're withdrawing both of them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think the idea of a committee or to study this in terms of the future of these is fine. My disposition, and I apologize if it sounded like I had a predetermined look at this. Yes, I have a predetermined in the sense that I think these buildings are irreplaceable. I think that old adobes just have so much going for them, and they do take high maintenance. I think the Pueblo muds their Pueblo every year, and I don't think you guys have to do that, but I just wanted that it's not a matter, to me, when we start splitting hairs, it's not a matter of that. It's just that I think that to tear them down reduces the fiber of this community, and that's my position about it. And as we go forward to what we keep and so forth, it would be good to keep that in mind in terms of different proposals, how we can. Knowing that, then I accept you withdrawing. But I wanted to add that as a footnote because I don't want you to think I'm out to get you guys. I really think you have other cities, Santa Fe and stuff, the old adobes are premium buildings. You go in, the sound is different. It has a lot of good bones. So I'm glad thank you for withdrawing at this time.
Mr. Chair, could I just ask one quick question before you adjourn? And that is, I do agree with Mr. Tarleton that particularly the doctor's house presents some challenges in that it has interior weight-bearing adobe walls that make very small rooms. One of the, what they call economic or functional obsolescence, one of the problems in the buildings of those days is that the rooms were so small that it's tough to have commercial viability to them. And something had occurred when we were standing out there looking at the two buildings, and that is we have two wonderful buildings, both of which are too small, but which are separated by a small driveway. If it was done to be consistent with the style of the buildings that are there, would the commission consider the possibility of actually allowing a modern addition that would connect, offset addition that would connect those two buildings, that would provide, let's say, a large enough dining room that it would make both buildings viable?
I think all buildings, old adobes especially, but I think all buildings are subject to additions and renovation. I mean, Martyrs put a new kitchen and they kept the old building right there on across from Kit Carson Park. I think the Taos Inn has added on and on and on, but they've kept the character of their street facade, and they've kept the old outdoor patio. Now it's indoor. They've been creative about how to keep it, but basically you can look at those buildings and say they are adobe. And I'm afraid that so far what I had seen, now I don't know what would come of it, proposals, what they'd proposed didn't look like adobes, and these buildings are adobe, and that's my concern. And if there are creative ways to, I think that's good. I think the code provides for additions, and it stipulates how they should be done, and basically the building should, well, we'll get into that in a work study, but as long as that's, I don't know the outcome of all this, but that I think this should be saved for you guys' own good. But I can't.
And I would like to add here, there's this secondary situation here that has yet not been resolved, and that is maintenance of these buildings. So it's arguable whether. We have already determined and discussed enough that the owners of properties need to maintain the buildings. If they're not, they're in violation of code. There has been no enforcement of that necessarily or penalty to date. But at this point, there is this has been withdrawn. These buildings still need to be maintained. I think we need to look at that.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Chama, it is our intent, now that we have more staff on board and Dinah isn't overworked being the whole department, that for those that were at the work session on the signage and lighting, we are then sending out a letter that talks about banners and some of the blatant violations to notify owners that of an effective date we will enforce. It was also our intent, after speaking with Historic Preservation and them reminding us of our obligations, and that this commission has in fact reflected that a number of demolitions have come before us, not due out of necessity architecturally, but out of neglect, that we will be sending out a notice to all addresses within the district, reminding them that they have maintenance responsibilities under the code, and that if not fulfilled, they will be NOV'd within the next 3 months.
Thank you. I was going to ask.
Thank you.
I was going
Thank
to
you for
ask
that
how
clarification. Thank you.
how that was going as a follow-up. Thanks for the follow-up. So I entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Second.
Third.
Thank you.
I approve.
We will adjourn. Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you, Mr. Tarleton, and thank you, Mark.